Welcome back to Q&A with RF Smart. My name is Sarah Archer, and today I've got Lawrence Cooper joining me. Lawrence is a member of our NetSuite sales team. You may recognize Lawrence from a Q&A that he did before where he answered the question, what is NetSuite? If you haven't checked out that video, I'm going to make sure that it's linked down below for you. But today our conversation is going to be around manufacturing and how NetSuite customers can utilize production staging to make their manufacturing processes just a little bit smoother. So Lawrence, let's go ahead and just jump into our topic for today. What is production staging?
Great question. So production staging is essentially when you are going to be manufacturing out of a specific area. So it's pulling material from a stocking area and bringing it to a manufacturing area where you're actually completing the build of a finished good. So a lot of times the customers that will, or companies that will use this type of process for production staging are people who are manufacturing the same type of component over and over again, or the same finished good where the components are going to be the same throughout, right? So if you have an assembly line and you're always producing the same car door, or an assembly line, or just like a desk where this person's always going to be doing the same build over and over again, a lot of times production staging can be helpful. And a big reason for this is because a lot of times operations like that don't want to pick for an assembly build or for a work order. Because, for example, let's say I was completing 20 work orders, right? And each work order had one finished good. And a finished good for me required 1 wooden block and 5 nails, right? So if I'm sitting on my desk and I'm going to complete these 20 work orders, maybe I've got a box of 100 nails that's going to complete these 20 work orders, right? And 20 wooden blocks. I don't necessarily want to do a scan or select all 5 nails that I'm going to use for every work order, right? Maybe what I want to do is just say, I just finished a build, boom, build it, and backflush it out of the area, right? Rather than having to pick for every single component. So that's one reason, a very common reason on why companies would want to use production staging to backflush the materials rather than having to pick for every single component.
So Lawrence, instead of backflushing out of that production staging bin, what if I just wanted to backflush out of normal inventory?
It's a great question. So, and that's something that comes up a lot of times is people start by just saying, oh, well, we can do that without needing, RF Smart or warehouse management system. We'll just backflush it straight out of inventory. Well, what happens is sometimes people stock inventory in multiple bins. I may have nails in bin A, B, and C. So if I backflush it out of normal stocking inventory, how do I know which bin I'm actually pulling it from, right? You want to make sure your inventory is accurate, and so you want to make sure you're pulling it out of the right bin. So by having everything in a production staging bin, you know the location where you're going to be actually backflushing all the materials out of. That can be really important when keeping inventory accurate and also for visibility.
So let's say that I am a manufacturer, I'm manufacturing, and I run out of materials. What do I do?
Great question. So that's where our bin replenishment functionality pairs up really well with production staging bin. Our bin replenishment is based on setting min and max levels on items in certain bins, and you can have any item bin combination. So in my production staging bin, I may have wooden blocks and 5 nails, or nails, right? Maybe a box of 100 and 20 wooden blocks. Well, I can set min and maxes for all of those items. So maybe when I fall to where I only have 10 nails left, I can only do 2 more work orders before I'm going to need to go and grab another box. We can trigger a replenishment that gets sent out to the warehouse floor that knows in the stocking area, hey, this person at desk 1 or manufacturing bin 1 needs to receive a replenishment of nails because he's running low. So that will trigger a replenishment. They'll go and do a simple bin transfer from the stocking inventory bin into the manufacturing bin, and now you can continue working and doing a manufacturing production without having to stop and go and grab other inventory or use Kanban cards or anything like that. You can do it all through the handheld, and the system drives the logic for you.
So Lawrence, this is a really great hypothetical situation that you shared with us, but I'm sure that those of you who are watching would love to hear an example of an RF Smart company that is doing this in real life. So what is a real life scenario for using production staging and bin replenishment?
Yeah, so I was actually with a customer in New York City recently who they do a bottling process, right? This is very common in the distillery and brewery industry, the beauty industry, food and beverage industry, right, where there's a bottling process of their finished good. And so this particular company had 3 assembly lines, which were bottling bottling machines, right? So they have somebody at the beginning of the assembly line loading up bottles, and they have, the goods that are being put into the bottles, and then they come out of the machine, and there's someone at the far end who is grabbing those finished bottles, putting them in cases, and then putting them away into inventory, right? Or putting them on a pallet to be put away into inventory. So without RSmart, what they were doing is they had a person manually doing all of this, right? And at the end of the assembly line, as they're completing these cases and putting the bottles into cases, they have someone with a sheet who's writing down, okay, this work order we just finished 5 cases, right? Or this work order we just finished 6 cases. And they're writing down how much they're manufacturing. And then at the end of the shift, they have to go back to a clerk in the back office who is then inputting that information and completing the actual assembly build transactions inside of NetSuite. Now, what they did with RSmart is they set up each one of those 3 manufacturing assembly lines as production staging bins, right? And they set bin replenishment min and max levels for the bottles and the components that needed to be in there, so they knew as they run low, a replenishment gets triggered to replenish that assembly line so it continues to run without having to stop. And then at the end of the assembly line, the person who is completing and putting the bottles into the cases, instead of having to write down how many cases they're building and completing, they are just entering on the RSmart handheld device, I just finished building 4 cases, and we're backflushing it right out of the production staging bin, right? I just completed another 6 cases. And they're doing it all on the device without having to put it on a piece of paper, send it back to a clerk in the back office to complete those transactions. Everything's being done in real time, so they're getting increased visibility, right? And they're not having to go back to have a full-time person who's just sitting in the back office entering transactions. Everything's being done on the RSmart device.
Well, Lawrence, it sounds like production staging, bin replenishment, those things really eliminate those manual processes, making it much more accurate and also easier to manufacture. So if you are using NetSuite and you're manufacturing today and you'd like to learn more about production staging, RFSmart's manufacturing functionality, go ahead and email us at info@rfsmart.com. We have several resources for manufacturers that I'm going to leave linked down below, as well as that Q&A with Lawrence that I mentioned from before. But for today, thank you so much for watching. Lawrence, thank you for being here. We'll see you guys again soon.